mourning the 45 transgender and non-binary people murdered in the United States this year alone, most of whom were Black or brown transgender women. Today, we honor them. To their friends, family, and community, we send our love and deep condolences, and we send hope for a future free from transphobic violence. I can't know what these losses feel like to our trans family and friends, nor is it my place to speak on this community's behalf. Suffice it to say, though, the very need for a Transgender Day of Remembrance at all speaks volumes of how much work we have yet to do. May their lives be remembered fondly. May their identities be honored. May their deaths move us to action, and may they each rest in peace. I ask you now to join me in a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you, and now I'll turn it over to Seraphy Allen. Good morning, Seraphy.
Good morning, Mayor. For the record, my name is Seraphy Allen. I use they, them pronouns, and I serve as the Director of Jobs, Housing, and Economic Equity to the Mayor. This morning, I am really grateful for City Council's attention to this day, and I'm here just to help kind of facilitate the conversation. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Lex.
Good morning, everyone. My name is, for the record, my name is Icct. I use they, them pronouns, and I serve as the City of Portland's first ever LGBTQIA+ policy analyst. I understand this morning we're a little short on time, and I want to ensure that we have sufficient time to hear from Alexis Woods, so I will be brief. It's an honor to serve in this role and to provide a critical focus on issues affecting queer Portlanders both within and outside the walls of City Hall. In this role, I'm going to perennially come in front of you all at least 3 times a year, and for three important occasions: Pride, Transgender Day of Visibility, and Transgender Day of Remembrance. And while it's always a great pleasure to elevate and celebrate our communities during Pride Month and Transgender Day of Visibility, Transgender Day of Remembrance is a reminder that we still have so much work ahead of us to prevent violence against trans people in Portland, specifically, as the mayor mentioned, Black and brown trans women. And while there are many advocates, activists, and elected officials working hard to make Portland a safer place for queer and trans people, we still have a long way to go. So I just wanted to say a quick few words this morning to please remember this the next time we come together to vote on important policy changes that affect the lives of queer people in our community, because for many of us in the trans and non-binary community, these issues are life or death issues. Thank you so much for your time today and your attention during this morning's proclamation.
Thank you very much. And colleagues, I don't know if anybody has anything they'd like to say prior to my reading the proclamation.
Wait, Mayor, I'm sorry. Did Alexis speak yet?
Oh, I wasn't.
Lex, we need to pitch it over to Alexis.
Pause. I think you were done. Sorry. Good morning, Alexis. It's good to see you. I see you there. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. My name is Alexis Robinson Woods. I currently serve as the Executive Director of Call to Safety, formerly Portland Women's Crisis Line, and I am a transgender woman of color. Brought up, born and raised here in Portland. These events are sort of mixed feelings for me, because while they are necessary and they need to happen to draw visibility and attention to what's going on, they also come with another year of a higher number than it was the year before. And this year, at least 2 of the 45 are from this state, from this city. That's becoming a problem for me because it's right here on my doorstep, one of which I knew. And so as this continues to happen, and with very little view of it changing, it's not reducing, it's not getting better. The violence is increasing on that. Root cause, of course, being racism, and then you can attack everything else from there, from homelessness, and everything beyond that. We do have a lot of work to do, but it also has to be done in conjunction with the queer community, because along with domestic violence is still going on within their community and how much that affects them, it just grows from there. So we need to understand these intersecting identities bring with them increased trauma, increased issues, and we need help from the entire community to make sure these things stop.
Thank you very much, and we appreciate your being here. Commissioner Hardesty?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Seraphy and Lex. Alex, thank you so much for being here today. I remember having an African-American woman use communications recently and talk about the unique experiences of both being a Black domestic violence victim and then adding issues of sexuality on top of that. I will say that I believe Portland Police Bureau's domestic violence unit is a compassionate approach with the little bit that we have there. But there's a huge missing voice in these tables, and it's your voice, Alex, and it's the voice of specific communities who experience domestic violence and policing differently. As the co-chair of the Gateway Domestic Violence Center, I am investing some additional dollars because of the 400%. Me and my colleagues are proposing to invest some additional resources because of the 400% increase in domestic violence since COVID began. I would very much like to figure out how we make sure we are centering the voices of survivors and because they know what they need. And I'm really concerned that we have a one-size approach like we do to so many things. And we expect Black, Indigenous, and other people of color to somehow squeeze their way into a system that was not built for them. And so I don't want to take away from this day. I just want to thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. Thank you all for doing the work that you are doing. I want us to be intentional moving forward because lives are at stake. And every day we talk about equity and don't actually produce equitable outcomes is the day someone else's life is in danger. So thank you again for being here, all of you. And Alex, I hope you will reach out and stay connected because I didn't know that Bradley Engelhouse had a new name, and I'm on the board of the Domestic Violence, Gateway Domestic Violence Center. So talk about disconnects, right, from folks who are supposedly working together.
Well, you didn't disconnect. They didn't change their name. I just moved. I was at Bradley Engels, their program director. I've been at Call to Safety as executive director for
it's a different organization. I'm sorry. I thought I heard you say formerly known as Bradley Engelhouse.
Nope. Northern Women's Crisis Line.
I'm old, so my hearing is bad some days. So thank you for the clarification, but also thank you for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. So I want to thank Seraphy and Lex and Alexis for joining us briefly this morning to honor those lost this year. This is always a very important touch point for us. I also want to thank the LGBTQ+ and the Friends Affinity Deep group for helping to craft the proclamation that I'm about to read. We are a better city because of our deep affinity groups and all the lived experience that they're willing to share. Our employees are willing to step forward and share with all of us. And so now the proclamation. Whereas the city of Portland is committed to equity, diversity, social justice, and mutual respect as a fundamental aspect of a healthy community. And whereas transgender Oregonians face serious barriers to meeting basic needs such as housing, employment, healthcare, education, and accurate documentation. And whereas transgender people live with a significant degree of caution and concern due to the lack of public acceptance towards the community. And whereas this year in the United States and Puerto Rico, the Human Rights Campaign has estimated that at least 45 transgender or gender nonconforming people have been fatally shot or killed by other violent means, the majority of which were Black or Latinx transgender women. And whereas These deaths are reflected of the alarming increase of 250 plus anti-trans and anti-LGBTQ related bills introduced across the United States this year, including recent school board efforts in Newburgh, Oregon. Whereas the Trevor Project estimates that at least one LGBTQ youth between the ages of 13 and 24 attempts suicide every 45 seconds in the United States, due primarily to a lack of support at home or in school. And whereas Transgender Day of Remembrance honors not just those who self-identify as transgender, but anyone who is murdered or passed away because of bias against transgender and gender nonconforming individuals. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor, City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim November 20th to be Transgender Day of Remembrance in Portland and encourage all residents to observe this day. Thank you for all of our presenters, and thank you, colleagues. Appreciate it.
Mayor, sorry, I just wanted to quickly.
Yes, Seraphy.
Thank you.
Commissioner
Sorry.
Ryan also. Seraphy, go ahead then, Commissioner
Okay,
Ryan.
I just wanted to make sure we correct the record that it's Alexis Robinson, not Alex, but Alexis.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate that, Seraphy. Commissioner Ryan.
Yeah, before we go on, I just wanted to get my voice in here to thank Seraphy for bringing this to our attention. And Mayor, the proclamation you read was beautiful. Thank you. And Alexis, it was so good to have you level set us this morning. And Lex, I'm so glad you're here. We really are improving because of your leadership. It's so important to have these days of remembrance. It's just important for me to just take a pause. I'm glad we had a moment of silence. There will be time to celebrate when it's due, but we have to remember. And I know we have a few of these days every year, and this one's very deep and meaningful to me. So I really appreciate that we took time before the gavel today to do this. I just wanted to get my voice in there to say that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Commissioner Ryan. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. My apologies, Alexis. I for getting your name wrong. My apologies.
Thanks, Commissioner Hardesty. All right, thank you, everyone. Keelan, with that, well, I have to call us into order. This is the Wednesday morning, November 17th, 2021 session of the Portland City Council. Good morning, Keelan. Please call the roll.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. Max.
Here.
Rubio.
Here.
Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Present.
Wheeler.
Here. Under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference, and the city's made several avenues available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the city, the meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGov PDX, www.portlandoregon.gov/video, and of course, channel 30. The public may provide written testimony to council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience, your flexibility, and your understanding as we manage these challenging times to conduct the city's business. And with that, Keelan, first up is communications. I believe all 5 slots are on the same subject. Why don't you go ahead and call the first individual, please? Item 809.
Oh, Mayor, I'm so sorry. Would you like to have council?
Oh, legal counsel. How could I forget? The rules of order and decorum from legal counsel. Thanks, Keelan. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and City Council. The following is the City Attorney's statement regarding conduct during electronic City Council meetings. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the Council Clerk's Office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while the City Council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you are representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption may result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded. And that's all.
All right, thanks a lot, Keelan. Thank you for reminding me. Item 809, first individual for communications, please.
Request of Debbie Iona to address council regarding public participation at city council meetings.
Good morning, Debbie.
Hi, thank you. I'm Debbie Iona, representing the League of Women Voters of Portland. The League promotes political responsibility through informed and active participation in government. Up until a few years ago, Portlanders could participate in city government by testifying on reports presented to council. These reports cover an array of topics. Recent examples include the Office of Equity Strategic Plan and reports on the state of housing and the North-Northeast Neighborhood Housing Strategy. A few years ago, we were taken by surprise when we learned that council would not take oral testimony on the OIR Group police shootings report. In our experience, this was an unprecedented change of procedure. Since then, we have shared our concerns about this change in letters and meetings with commissioners and staff. At a PCCEP meeting earlier this year, this issue came up. A member of the mayor's staff stated that oral testimony on reports wasn't taken anytime during her years at City Hall. This prompted us to look back at the 2016 records, the year before Mayor Wheeler took office. Portland Cop Watch joined the league in writing to the staffer, informing her of our finding that the public indeed was invited to testify every time a report was presented. More recently, the league's concerns increased when we heard the city attorney fail to mention during the council session's opening instructions that it's up to the presiding officer if oral testimony is taken on reports. Written information provided by the council clerk also fails to mention that fact. It is our fear that over time, newly elected city commissioners and the public will begin to believe that testimony has never been allowed on reports. The League and several other organizations recently wrote to the city attorneys and auditors' offices, asking them to inform the public that testimony on reports is allowed at the discretion of the presiding officer. We hope at a minimum action will be taken on that recommendation. Ideally, we would like to see the mayor once again take oral testimony on reports. We have witnessed valuable discussions take place between the public and elected officials in response to what was said. Furthermore, reports sometimes include recommendations for future policy making. The public is able to highlight those that seem most promising, especially after hearing further details provided in staff presentations. In addition, observers learn from those who testify and are able to identify others with an interest in the issue. This promotes collaboration and builds the network of those who can knowledgeably engage in future discussions. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Debbie. And I'm sure I'll have comments at the end of this, but I'll just wait till the very end until I heard everybody's presentation. Next individual, 810, please.
Request of Dan Handelman to address council regarding public testimony on reports. Dan, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry. I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch, Mayor Wheeler, and especially Commissioners Hardesty, Maps, Rubio, and Ryan. For 4 years, Portland Cop Watch has been urging City Council to return to its previous practice of allowing contemporaneous oral public testimony on report presentations. The response we've heard back is that we can submit comments in writing. However, there's no guarantee that you, our elected officials, will read that testimony. Moreover, when responding in real time to a presentation on a report, the community can ask questions that might not have been obvious until the hearing is underway. We have in the past effectively raised concerns during presentations about reports, reviewing Portland Police Deadly Force, Portland Joint Terrorism Task Force annual reports, Portland Police Bureau annual reports, analyses from the city auditor about police issues, and Citizen Review Committee recommendations, including in early 2014 when they presented crowd control ideas. This last item is timely as CRC came before council just in September, and we were unable to provide contemporaneous testimony. I believe that was the hearing where Mayor Wheeler acknowledged receiving our comments, but nothing about the substance of them. Portland Cop Watch wanted to testify when the auditor presented her update on the racially discriminatory gang enforcement team a few years ago. I think it was on that issue when I asked the auditor to invite public comment, and she said, "You testify before council more than anyone I know." Even if that were true, it's not a reasonable justification for not taking public testimony on reports. Similarly, though the Independent Police Review is slated to be replaced in 2 or 3 years, its annual reports used to come before council and testimony was taken, but hasn't been done for years. Hearings on the officer-involved shooting reports date back to their first iteration in 2003, which included public testimony. At that hearing, the Police Assessment Resource Center acknowledged that a few of the incidents they reviewed were only brought to their attention by Portland Cop Watch. The Bureau's records were not as complete as ours. The letter we sent shows our group reports on shootings were heard in 2014 and 2016, for example. In 2019, Mayor Wheeler allowed testimony, though limited to 3 people, when Donna Hayes insisted she be allowed to talk about the OIR report, which addressed the police killing of her grandson, Quanis. In every instance, public comments enhanced the council discussion of these reports. The problem is time. The presiding officer can always cut presentations to 1 or 2 minutes. If the problem is people straying off topic, as an example, I was gavelled down by Mayor Hales in 2016 when I was talking about a contract for a bridge crane, and he thought I was addressing the Police Association contract. Maybe he was right. Council has been taking other measures which have been limiting public input, including adding documents on the agenda at the last minute as 4/5 items. On one of these items, there were quite a few invited guests who were given as much time as they wanted to speak. Government forums should not be like a social media feed where you only hear from the people you want. It also shouldn't be like the worst of social media where people are hurling insults and going off topic. But it should be a well-moderated meeting where community members with various perspectives get to share those in a way other people might hear them and maybe agree or disagree and take action based on what they hear. We urge council to restore public comment on reports. And I just want to add that, as Ms. Iona pointed out, this morning's announcement by the city attorney did not mention that you can testify about reports.
Thank you, Dan. Next, individual 811, please, Keelan.
Request of Marlene Wallingford to address council regarding public testimony on reports. Marlene, you're muted.
Thank you for this opportunity to talk to the City Council. I am Marlene Wallingford, and I am a board member of the Portland JCL, which is a civil rights group that has been around since 1928. And we are concerned that the City Council is not allowing public testimony after the annual report of the cases of the Portland Police Bureau's cooperation with the Joint Terrorism Task Force in 2021. The report is of high interest to our community groups that have worked to cooperate, to end cooperation since the late 90s, and the mayor's policy also has not been deliberated upon as are discussed by City Council. So we are concerned that the FBI's guidelines allow investigations to be started with little evidence that laws have been broken. The FBI can initiate an investigation without any indication of terrorist or criminal activity. It can gather a wide range of information. We've heard reports from the Muslim community that the FBI has surveilled individuals attending local mosques. We know the FBI has a history of investigating groups of people solely on the basis of their race or their political beliefs. Activists that are working to affect social change, such as Martin Luther King, environmentalists, climate change activists, and reflecting on my own community's history, Japanese Americans were considered potential saboteurs and have been targets of investigations. So Oregon has powerful anti-spying laws in place. So it's critical that the public and the city council be sure that Portland police officers are not being used by the FBI to violate state statutes and civil liberties. The community deserves to know how our local police officers are being used. One of the only ways to do this is to ensure transparency in the activities of the Portland police when they cooperate with the JTTF. We have also have a concern that the reports that have been provided have given minimal information. The letter referred to by Ms. Iona highlights discussions about JTTF reports in 2012, 2013, and 14. The 2013 report was barely accepted on a 3-2 vote due to its community and council members' concerns about its threadbare substance. The 2014 report was also not accepted at first, but was held over so that the Portland Police Bureau could answer questions about it the next week. We need an opportunity to engage in open discussion. Communication is only one way when the public comments are not allowed. Another issue, because we are still having meetings remotely, it is impossible for people to sign up during the meeting to testify. Our democracy is fragile, and we deserve to know how public employees are being used, and we should be able to give feedback. That this dynamic process should ensure better outcomes and better communication with our community. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next individual, please, Keelan. I think we're on 812 if I have marked this properly.
That's correct.
Great.
Request of Carol Landsman to address council regarding public testimony on reports.
Hi, I'm Carol Landsman, and I'm representing Jewish Voice for Peace. As a city planner, I used to joke that when you drive into Oregon from another state, the Welcome to Oregon sign should have a home of process underneath it. Public involvement has always been very important to municipalities and entities in Oregon. But we seem to be going backwards. Since Mayor Wheeler has cut off public testimony, I think that everybody is losing out. As a city planner, I know that reports can be very expensive. And to cut out another dimension of that report is valuable. I mean, it's not valuable. It diminishes the value of the report for lots of reasons, not the least of which is that citizens, residents should have the sense that they're participating. Just the mere fact of giving testimony is good for citizen involvement. Certainly, it's good for you guys because you get to hear what people have to say. You can ask questions. You don't have to read it because God knows you have enough stuff to read. Now, I understand that you're worried about time, but in the long run, I think not hearing testimony takes more time. At JVP, we wanted to testify about G4S a couple of months ago, but because of this rule, we weren't able to. But we were able to sign up for one of these spots, the one that I'm talking in. However, not everybody who wants to testify comes from a group that understands. And it's like putting up roadblocks for public involvement. And I think that's so antithetical to the Portland way of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item, 813. Next individual, please, Keelan.
Request of Emery Mort to address council regarding public testimony on reports.
Sorry, that took a second. Council, good morning. My name is Emery Mort from the Portland Metro People's Coalition. I want to paint a picture of what a rigorous, creative report presentation could look like and contrast with the unacceptable dynamics we currently are accepting as the city's normal. Imagine a council session on an annual report that compared it to a report from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and other reports from the past 5 years. Imagine comparing the report at hand with that of an innovative participatory municipality in another country. Imagine presenting a report, say a police annual report, alongside recently publicly funded audits of that bureau's operations. Imagine knowledgeable city actors going on the evening news and actively debating and critiquing reports with a knowledgeable moderator. Given the challenges we face and the level of high performance vision we must together achieve, the fact that spoken public comment on reports is being blocked exposes a dismissal of potential in city performance. In 2020, a huge outpouring of demonstrations calling for a new era in public safety inspired and roiled the city. In a normal society, the police bureau, funded by public money, might do something like offer up significant policy changes to the upset public that pays for its existence. But that was simply never something police or its commissioner were offering. And now when the annual report comes out, there is no mention of this, no mention of the absence of any police offer to the public, a crucial policy choice. Instead, pages are talking about the challenging years for police officers, as if the option of willing policy change was never even considerable, therefore unmentionable. Offering no public testimony on a report like this is a failure of city management, but indicative of unacceptable US norms. It's comparable to if the US military issued reports on Afghanistan, bemoaning a lack of troops and money, but omitting entirely that the situation on the ground meant the country could be taken back in mere days, as we just saw happen. It's leaders' jobs to listen to the public tracking these problems and speak up against the dangerously half-true reports before severe problems become catastrophes. Instead of the city addressing glaring failures in basic reporting, the public is met with misinformation. So I'm someone somewhat new to municipal governance structures, and I'm being led around by professionals within City Hall from the top down who seek to impress on us, the unknowing public, that even public comment is not allowed on these crucial reports. My esteemed friends here today tell me, no, that's ludicrous. We've spoken to reports for decades. That our level of civic engagement has come to this is a little disheartening and in need of reversal. We should be running and hustling in the opposite direction. We need to demonstrate actively to the public that governance and public agencies are crucial to our well-being, thriving, and surviving. Any governing body meeting the moment needs to be actively opening and iterating upon public feedback on critical government reports. Let's do this. Let's open up reports. Thank you.
Thank you, Emery. So that concludes communication. So I do want to respond to this. Commissioner Hurst, do you want to go first?
I can wait till you're done, Mayor.
All right, good. So this is not a hill I'm needing to die on. So I want to be very clear, first of all. I want to correct a few things that I heard that I want the broader public to understand. Reports are only one mechanism that the City Council uses to receive information. Public testimony is always allowed on either ordinances or resolutions. Resolutions often include the implementation of recommendations, and that's why resolutions also allow public testimony. Ordinances always allow public testimony because decisions are always made in the context of the deliberation of an ordinance. The same is not true for reports. And per the city website, it says a report provides information, transmits documents, and or makes recommendations. Reports are commonly used to approve bids and the completion of contracts, make appointments to boards or commissions, and make recommendations. However, to be clear, when a decision is made, it often, with the exception of those appointments or the conclusion of a contract that the City Council has already publicly deliberated and taken testimony on, no decisions are made through those reports. accept the receipt of the information that the City Council has requested in receiving the report. I have always believed that the language we use at the end of our reports is inaccurate. What we should be voting on is the receipt of the report rather than the agreement to anything that is in the report. And Commissioner Hardesty, you'll remember you and I wanted to make that crystal clear a few weeks ago when we received a report, and there was much in the report we disagreed with, and we wanted to make it clear that by voting on the report, we were simply voting that we'd received, that we'd accepted the report, but we did not necessarily agree to the contents therein. Now, if we were to take those reports and actually seek to implement some strategy or make an investment or implement a policy, it would always have to come back to the City Council in the form of an ordinance or a resolution. We would take public testimony. There would be that public deliberation that you request. And so that is the reason that I made a decision when I came in as mayor. And I think all of you here, none of your newbies, you're all very aware of what the circumstances were like in the early weeks of my tenure presiding over the Portland City Council. And I certainly didn't wish to prolong what was taking place at that time. However, this has been my policy for the reasons I just said. The decisions aren't made. There are multiple opportunities to actually be able to testify. In your testimony, you mentioned GVRT. There was extensive public testimony around the issue of GVRT when it came forward as a budget item. Marlene, you mentioned the Joint Terrorism Task Force. Ironically, you made the argument as to why I wanted to stay in the Joint Terrorism Task Force. I have no idea what the Joint Terrorism Task Force is doing or who they're investigating or what they're surveilling. I don't know because we're no longer part of the Joint Terrorism Task Force. But as part of our getting out of the Joint Terrorism Task Force, there were exceptions, and we did ask that the Police Bureau report back on specific situations where they might have had communications with or some interaction with the Joint Terrorism Task Force. And that's what that report is all about. But like I said, this is I agree with you. Generally, more public input is always a better answer than less. This is not a hill I'm prepared to die on. I see this more as an administrative question. If a majority of my colleagues would like to open up public testimony on reports, I have no objection. And those are my comments. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. And let me just thank each and every person who testified today. I remember my very early days, January of 2019, and council meetings would go like this. They'd be gavelled in, somebody would stand up and create a disruption, it'd be gavelled out. The public wasn't allowed to sit inside City Hall because there was fear of the public being out of control. I wanted the public and needed the public to come into City Hall, and they did. We started having people come in, and was everybody well behaved all the time? No, but I thrive on making sure that the public should be able to be in their house, right? City Hall is the public's house. And I will say the reason I'm on this side of the table is because of all the years I spent testifying on the other side of the table. I know that even though we weren't able to make any changes on the settlement agreement when it came out from behind closed doors with the DOJ, the public's input into what was in that settlement agreement and what should have been, I think, was vital to us moving forward. The fact that I found out recently that the Police Bureau and the auditor communicated directly with the DOJ without any interaction with the City Council, I was pretty appalled by that. Because I read in the paper about the response to what happened last summer as presented to the DOJ. I'm in awe of the public when the mayor and I held 2 community meetings on how we were going to impact the next police contract. There was a lot of smart people in the room who had spent a lot of time thinking about how that could happen. It is vital to me. I'm disappointed anytime the public wants to weigh in and they don't get an opportunity to, because I always learn something and I'm in awe. I mean, the fact that the public got a budget last week and people are making very specific recommendations. I'm in awe that the public can absorb all that information so quickly. And so I've always been disappointed when I get communications from the public and then I'm told that it's just a decision. And I agree with you. When we change the language of how we start the meeting to imply that it's not a discretionary decision, it's just a fact, it does undermine our democracy. And at a time where we need to be healing as a community, at a time where we have to bring down the rhetoric, at a time where we have to see each other as humans, more community engagement is better than people being outside feeling like they have to be on the extreme edges. I believe in Portlanders, and I think when Portlanders have an opportunity to weigh in, we as the council make better decisions. I want people who believe in Portland and Portlanders to testify at City Council. I want the public to know that we're in this together. So I've always supported the League of Women Voters, Portland Cop Watch, and others who say, why are we cutting off the people who've invested so much volunteer energy and helping us do better? I can say from my personal experience as an activist and as a community organizer, we made a difference when we testified. And there would have been really poor decisions made sometime had the public not been able to testify. So I'm in 100% agreement with what's been said. And if my colleagues agree, and the mayor says he's not going to stand in the way, I think we could immediately start taking testimony on the reports that have a high public interest, right? I mean, police accountability is something everybody's vested in. So why would we not take the public testimony? We're all vested in getting people off the street. Why would we not talk to the people most impacted? So I'm with you.
Yeah, and just to be clear, and I'll get to Commissioner Rubio, for me, it's an all or nothing. We're not going to pick and choose, and we're not going to have the presiding officer decide which reports are worthy of public input and which aren't. Either it's an all or nothing.
I'm good with that. Because I think a lot of times we get reports on stuff that just make me want to put toothpicks in my eyes. And I'm wondering, why are we taking 2 hours on a report that I could have read?
I'm glad you said that. Commissioner Rubio.
No, I just want to appreciate what everybody has said. And, it's my first, it's nearing my first year on council. And I too agree that we should be hearing how community feels about reports as well. I also want to acknowledge, Mayor, what you said and, about how it was when you started, and that was a very real thing. And I just appreciate the opportunity to revisit that now and be responsive to what community is asking for. I do see it sort of as, I know it is a role where we're accepting the report. And for me as a new commissioner, it's also helpful to hear the qualitative experiences connected to that report that are coming from community. That's also informative for me as a commissioner. So I feel like it's a part of that report that we're getting is how community is engaging as well. So, and anyway, for what it's worth, I just wanted to chime in on that and appreciate the conversation that we had and appreciate the testimony and onward.
Thank you.
I hope we'll use this as a training vehicle of how you take the communication slots and actually create an opportunity for dialogue. Very well done, wonderful people. Thank you.
So I'm hearing a majority of my council say they would like reports to be open for public testimony. So I'm making a decision here and now based on a majority of that council, the city council saying that we will now take public testimony on reports. Colleagues, and also I'll encourage some of you who are regular testifiers in front of the City Council, please be aware that we require our city employees to make these reports back to council as a condition of their employment. And so I will do everything I can to make sure that the space is a safe and wholesome and honorable space for them to be able to do their work. That's my commitment to them, as always. Thank you for your testimony today. Next is the consent agenda. Keelan, do we have any items pulled off the consent agenda?
We've had no requests.
Very good. Can you please call the roll on the consent agenda?
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The consent agenda is adopted. First time certain item, please. Item number 814.
Proclaim November 2021 to be Native American Heritage Month.
Thank you, Keelan. I'm going to turn this over to Bree Fraley, who is our Director of Government Relations, Director of the Office of Government Relations, to introduce our guest speakers for this item. Good morning, Bree. How are you today?
Good morning, Mayor. Thank you. And good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Brandon Fraley. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Director of the Office of Government Relations. Dalaha, Hagiyasham, Hashayu, Shutnu Juanila, Shahushi Huetetre, Shi Talawa Dani, Ngana Shran Stat Yet You, Matugat Shri Shran Na Deshri. It fills my heart with happiness to be here today to celebrate and recognize National Native American Heritage Month. I'm honored to be here as co-founder of the newly established Infinity Group Indigenous PDX. Indigenous PDX seeks to facilitate a cultural connection and professional advancement of self-identified Indigenous City of Portland employees. As November will be proclaimed National Native American Heritage Month, Indigenous PDX's inaugural presentation to City Council is rooted in honoring and centering those who have called Portland home since time immemorial, while celebrating the diversity and resilience of Portland's Indigenous community members. We will uplift the city's core values as we engage in systems change and city policy development that supports Indigenous staff at the City of Portland, as well as the community as a whole. Thank you to the Tribal Relations Program for bringing forward past proclamations and to usher the way for the Cross-City Affinity Group to come together to present on National Native American Heritage Month. Today, we have two special guests, Grand Ronde tribal citizen Brian Mercer, Regional Director of the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Portland Area Office, and Yakima tribal citizen Asia Decoto, the first female Executive Director of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, as well as Laura John, Tribal Relations Director, who will reflect on the work of the Tribal Relations Program at the City of Portland. Brian, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Bree. Hopefully folks can hear me all right. Klahayan, Nakanim Brian Mercier. Good morning. My name is Brian Mercier. I'm the Regional Director of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And I wanted to take a few moments. Well, I want to thank you for giving me a few moments to talk a little bit about why this proclamation is important to Portland natives. Many may not know that we have quite a brain trust of professional natives here in the Portland area. Not only do we have the regional office of the Bureau of Indian Affairs at the Department of Interior, but my colleague Asia Dakota, who you hear from here shortly, we have CRITFIC, NEA, NARA, ITC, Portland Area Health Board. The list goes on, NICWA. I could go on for a lot longer about all the various Native nonprofits and Native professionals we have here in Portland. So having the city and the mayor, you all recognizing and cherishing Native American Heritage Months, valuing and welcoming Native professionals to Portland is very critical for our success with all these professional organizations we have in Portland. And I thank you for that. Portland is on the indigenous lands of what are today the Grand Ronde and Siletz tribes. Others tribes in the federally recognized tribes would also argue they have direct connections to the Portland area, and we respect that as well. So I want to just thank you all for the opportunity and thank you for recognizing this. And I'm excited to hear from my colleague, Asia Dakota. Thanks, Bree.
Shachmaitsky, Inmi Wanikshash Tukasauch. Thank you so much for inviting me here today, and thanks, Brian, for the words. My name is Asia Dakota. As previously mentioned, I am a citizen of the Yakama Nation who has called the city of Portland home for the last 12 years. I'm also a mom of 3 children who are citizens of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians out of North Dakota. And I currently serve as the executive director of the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, led by the Nez Perce, Umatilla, Warm Springs, and Yakama tribes. It makes me very happy and very proud to be part of proclaiming Native American Heritage Month and to celebrate the rich and diverse communities, traditions, and cultures that make up Indian country. While of course we must acknowledge the history of genocide, relocation, and assimilation that still impact many Indigenous families and communities today, this is also an opportunity to recognize Native American resilience, to honor traditional knowledge, to lift up the contributions of tribal people to the shared story of this country, and renew our commitment to the values we all have in common. Many of us living in the Great Northwest feel a deep connection to nature. We care for and are concerned about our environment. We try to live lightly on the land, and we do all that we can to be good stewards of the gifts that are around us. For Native people, our natural resources are our cultural resources. We must restore and protect our ecosystems for generations to come so that all our great-grandchildren and their great-grandchildren will have a rich and nurturing place that supports their cultures and ways of life. A healthy place where they will have abundant salmon to catch in cool and clean water. Unfortunately, this is a hope for those who come after us is uncertain because climate change is occurring all around us and we see those effects today. The decisions we make today are not for us, and we must be bold in our vision for the future. Again, I am really thrilled to be part of today's proclamation by the City of Portland, and I look forward to our continued partnership and future opportunities to engage as a tribal community member and also as an advocate for the Columbia River Basin. Thank you.
Thank you, Asia. I'm so glad that you were able to make it today, and just want to publicly congratulate Asia for becoming the first ever Native woman to run the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission. If we were all together, I'd say clap, even though we don't clap in council, but it's a huge deal. And Asia, you are definitely up for that job. You're a perfect match, and we're so lucky to have you here in the Portland area. I wanted to take a few minutes today. Originally, I had invited an elder to come, but there's some technical difficulties, and so he wasn't able to reach us through the Zoom today, and did send his regards. I had invited Mr. Buzzy Nelson, who is Joyce Nelson's husband, to come, and unfortunately, he's not able to make it here this morning. So in lieu of that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the summit this week. As you all know, we held our 3rd annual travel relations employee training last month, and we had almost 500 participants. Those 500 participants were majority from the city of Portland, but overwhelmingly, there was a great number of individuals that represented 15 local governments, and it was just amazing. People have really loved the summit training and feel like it prepares them. This week, we'll be hosting 7 tribes delegations from our region in a virtual summit between our city and tribal nations, where they will be introduced to the city, hear from bureau directors, and then we'll be able to engage in a long list of summit discussions that we're really excited to see the outcome of those discussions. As part of our program this year, we created a video, and I'd like to have a video played, and then I'll go ahead and pass it back to Bree. Thanks so much, everyone.
We are still here. Our songs float in this river. Our hands build the streets that you roam. Some of us come from far away, and some of us have ancestors that were born in your backyard. We are the people, the ones tending the fire and weaving dreams. Do you see us? Our voices are strong, our spirits are high. Take courage to respect us just the way we are. Together, we can all thrive. Your commitment is needed to the land and the people. So if we are all healing together, can you make a stand? We are still here.
I'll go ahead and pass it over back to Bree. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. That gave me goosebumps. I really appreciate the preview of what is to come tomorrow. Shuknu Juanila, Brian, Asia, and Laura for your perspectives and time today. As we celebrate Native American Heritage Month this November, I urge us all to think about how our celebrations can turn into meaningful actions that will improve the well-being of our First Peoples. It is an honor to represent the city as the first Native American woman director of the Office of Government Relations and the new Infinity Group Indigenous PDX. Nganashran Shtat Yetu, and I will hand it over back over to Council and Mayor. Thank you today.
All right, thank you, Director Fraley, Laura, and our guests, Brian and Asia, for joining us today. We sure appreciate it. I appreciate everyone being here to speak today. National Native American Heritage Month provides yet another opportunity for the City Council to celebrate the First Peoples of our country. Activating the city's core value of anti-racism, National Native American Heritage Month provides a focused time to reflect on and analyze the overall narrative of America. Native American Heritage Month gives recognition to the First Peoples of this land and creates an opportunity to educate and inform our city on the continued contributions to our society. We celebrate the culture and the heritage of these remarkable Americans who deeply enrich the quality and character of our city as well as our nation overall. In our commitment to being an ally to Indian country, the city is committed to investing in our partnerships with tribal nations. A little over a month ago, the city hosted our third annual Tribal Relations Employee Training, which focused on continuing to build foundational knowledge of tribal governments, sovereignty, treaty rights, and serving the needs of Indigenous Portlanders. Participation in the training reached 500 city and partner jurisdictional employees. Many gained new perspectives on how to approach their work, from spatial planning that's inclusive of tribal communities to approaches on how to collaborate with sovereign nations. Tomorrow, we will welcome tribal government leaders from all across our region to our third annual Tribal Nations Summit to engage with city, nurture diplomatic relationships, and identify opportunities for deepened partnerships. We're working with our new Chief Procurement Officer to identify ways to reduce barriers to attract Native-owned businesses to provide services to the city, as well as reviewing internal systems that pose barriers to partnership opportunities. I like to think of this as just the beginning of our firm commitment to honor and celebrate Indian country and the tribal communities that make up the foundational makeup of our community. I would at this time like to open it up to any comments from my colleagues before I read the proclamation. I see Commissioner Mapps has his hand up raised, and then Commissioner Rubio. Commissioner Mapps, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and colleagues. I'd like to also thank Bree, Brian, Asia, and Laura for their testimony this morning. And I am delighted to join you in declaring November 2021 to be National Native American History Month. During National Native American Heritage Month, we come together as a community to celebrate our city's rich Native American history, culture, and community. Every Portlander should be invested in the history of the relationship between the city of Portland and Portland's Native American community, because the history of Native peoples in the Willamette Valley is also Portland's origin story. And this story contains many grim chapters. The land that we know as Portland has been occupied by Native Americans for at least 11,000 years. The names of the peoples who first lived on these lands are still familiar to us. There were the Clackamas, Willamette, Multnomah, and Tualatin peoples. Those people lived, loved, and thrived on the lands that we now call Portland from about 8,000 BC to the early 1800s when the first white people arrived in the Willamette Valley. That first crew of white people arrived in Portland in 1805. You might have heard of them, Lewis and Clark. Of course, we should remember that the members of Lewis's and Clark's expedition included a young Native American woman, known to most Americans as Sacagawea, and a Black man, whose name was York. Shortly after Lewis and Clark, Sacagawea, and York's expedition visited the Pacific Northwest, more white explorers, fur trappers, missionaries, and settlers arrived in the Willamette Valley. That wave of European immigrants brought American civilization to the Pacific Northwest, including the local governments that we serve in today. White settlers also brought diseases like smallpox and measles, which devastated the indigenous populations here in Portland. Between the early 1800s and the 1850s, those plagues killed between 50 and 90% of the Native Americans who lived in the Portland Basin. Then in 1850, Congress passed the Organ Donation Land Law, which, quote, granted every white settler 160 acres of Oregon public lands. Of course, these public lands were seized from the indigenous peoples of the Willamette Valley. And it is no coincidence that the city of Portland was incorporated 1 year after the Organ Donation Land Law was signed into law. Now, despite disease, displacement, and disfranchisement, Portland's Native American community has persevered. Today, nearly 60,000 Native Americans live in the Portland area, which makes Portland the 9th largest urban Native American population in the United States. Although Portland's indigenous communities are thriving today, they are also still healing from more than 2 centuries of discrimination. Today in Portland, poverty rates in Native communities are 3 times higher than poverty rates in white communities. Today in Portland, unemployment rates among Native Americans are 70% higher than unemployment rates amongst white Portlanders. Today in Portland, more than 20% of Native Americans experience hunger on a monthly basis. Colleagues, the uncomfortable truth is that the economic disadvantages Native American Portlanders face today are a direct product of the practices and policies of the past and the present. Colleagues, we cannot undo the wrongs of the past, but we can commit to do better in this present and the future. And that's why Native American Heritage Month is so important. During Native American Heritage Month, this council reaffirms its commitment to preserving indigenous cultures, languages, places, and history. During Native American Heritage Month, this council reaffirms our commitment to respecting tribal sovereignty and honoring tribal treaties. During Native American Heritage Month, this council reaffirms our commitment to bringing economic equality and economic opportunity to today's and future generations of Native peoples. And during Native American Heritage Month, this council recognizes our partners who are helping to write the next chapter in the history of the relationship between the city of Portland and our Native neighbors. That's why I want to recognize the great work done by the City of Portland's Office of Tribal Relations. In particular, I'd like to congratulate Laura John and her team for recently pulling together a wildly successful Tribal Relations Summit. In addition, I'd like to thank the City of Portland's Indigenous PDX Affinity Group for helping organize this proclamation and for their advocacy on behalf of Portland's Native American public servants. I would also like to recognize the amazing work done by the Native American Youth and Family Center. And I would like to take a moment to share how proud I am of the good folks over at the Jim Pepper Native Arts Council. The Jim Pepper Native Arts Council is a nonprofit group which provides music education to Native American high school students. Many years ago, I sat on their board and I am in awe of what that organization is doing these days. Now, colleagues, before I wrap up my comments today, I want to share one last bit of Native American history with you that I think about a lot, and I hope it gives you something to think about too. Now, I have a question. Have you ever wondered why some major streets in Portland are on a diagonal? You know how Sandy Boulevard and Foster Boulevard cut through our regular street grids in a weird way? Where does that come from? The answer is ancient. Our diagonal boulevards like Sandy and Foster follow the roots of major Indian paths established prior to white people arriving on these lands. In other words, Portland's diagonal boulevards are literally an example of how the paths cut by ancient Native Americans shape the paths Portlanders walk today. Revisiting memories like that is what Native American History Month is all about. Native American History Month is an invitation to all Portlanders to learn more about the influence our Native American ancestors have had on Portland, the Portland we know and love today. That's why I am delighted to join you in declaring November 2021 to be Native American Heritage Month. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mapps. Commissioner Rubio, your hand, did it go down or did something happen there?
No, it was up. I just took it down because
very
you were
good.
about to.
Commissioner Rubio, you're up next, and then Commissioner Ryan and Commissioner Hardesty.
Great, thank you, Mayor. And thank you for bringing this proclamation forward. Also, a big thanks to Bree, Laura, and our tribal relations team for the work that you do for our city and for the region's Indigenous communities and tribes. And congratulations, Asia, for your new leadership role at Crickvic. Today, we recognize the tremendous contributions of these communities to our city and region. And too often, these contributions have for too long been lost or invisible within our city and state's white colonial settler narrative. And we have left unacknowledged that the city we love, so much of it was and is home to Indigenous communities long before pioneers and settlers arrived. And it's important to state that the truth is that we haven't even truly begun to grapple with and reconcile that our state has flourished and prospered at the expense of these communities, at the expense of exploitation and erasure of the first people of this land that have existed here since time immemorial. And despite these things, Northwest Native American communities continue to shape and build community here due to the love, joy, strength, resilience, pride in their indigeneity and the values of culture, family, and community. And we honor and lift up these communities today. Our city is immeasurably better for the economic, cultural, educational, political, and artistic contributions of Portland Indigenous community members, elected leaders and community leaders, businesses and nonprofit organizations. And our city is made better for the numerous civic contributions of Indigenous PDX affinity group and employees and their work to ensure that we have a more representative and more responsive government to who Portland is today. And in follow-up to last month's Indigenous Peoples Day today and the Tribal Nations Summit later this week, provides us with another opportunity to recommit to engaging, to learning, and participating in the long-term work necessary to dismantle systemic racism and the legacy of colonialism in our city. So thanks again to all of the community leaders, to government relations and the tribal relations team for their work on this today.
Thank you. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, Mayor, thank you for bringing this forward. This is an important proclamation celebrating the rich cultures, histories, and contributions of Native people. Thank you, Bree, and congratulations for launching the Affinity Organization for Employees Indigenous PDX. Thank you, Brian, Aja, congratulations on the new appointment. And Laura, it's always good to see you. Your collective leadership and partnership says so much about what's good about our city. Like most people, my identities are multiple. I come from a very diverse family, one which includes enrolled members of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, and recognize that both our nation and the state of Oregon has sordid histories with tribes and First Nations at the bequest of white supremacy, reinforced by institutional racism and cultural erasure. If we don't bring this truth out into the forefront and acknowledge it, we will never heal, nor will we move forward with more intentionality. I've learned this requires supporting the leadership and wisdom of Native American Indigenous people who continue to advocate passionately for their community's way of life and the well-being of the land that have been stewards of since time. Indigenous communities are facing substantial housing disparities in Oregon, and we need to do more. In fact, this week during a tour of 3 affordable housing developments that were recently constructed or in motion by Native American Youth and Family Center, I was just thrilled to learn more and about their partnership with NARA. I was reminded that Native American community is significantly overrepresented in Oregon's houseless population, accounting for more than 50% of unhoused people of color. And it is the least likely to be sheltered of any community counted. This is a real startling disparity. Now more than ever, we need to turn to and uplift local Native American communities to help steer our practices and policies for better. My office is committed to this belief. And personally, I will always reach out in allyship on any issue connected to the climate. Your community is the wisdom on climate. Before I close, I want to share my thanks and appreciation to Director Laura John for all the work that she has done in such a short period of time and through the Office of Government Relations to deepen partnerships, strengthen collaborations, and enhance communities for diplomacy between the City of Portland and tribal nations of the region. Again, thank you, Director John. And I want to also acknowledge my Chief of Staff, Kelly Torres, who is a part of the Native American community. Finally, like my colleagues said, I really look forward to joining you all later this week in the 2021 City of Portland Tribal Nation Summit. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, all our spokespeople today. A special thanks to Laura John. Laura John is a one-woman tsunami. There's nothing she cannot do. There's no one she cannot connect. And I am very grateful for the opportunity to have worked with her for the last 3 years. We have done a lot, but we have so much more to do to center Indigenous voices as we continue to address climate devastation, economic devastation for our most vulnerable community members. Laura John is an excellent teacher and connector, and I am looking so forward to the summit later this week to deepen our relationships and our understanding of the independence that is part of the independent governance that we have to build strong work relationships with. And I just want to stop by saying I was struck by someone saying earlier that there's only a few times a year we get to come in front of the city council. I would hope that November isn't the only month that we center Indigenous voices at City Hall, just like it makes me batty when we center Black voices only in February. This is something we have to do in every policy decision that we make. And it's just a reminder today that we still have a lot of work to do, but I am so proud of how far we've come and our commitment to continue this journey together. We cannot afford to allow people to continue to try to divide communities because we survived COVID. And by the way, it's not over yet because we looked out for each other. Community members looked out for each other. And Native communities have certainly taught us that they know how to value the land much more than we do. And we can learn a lot as we move forward. And real partnership and real value of Indigenous ways of actually respecting the earth and respecting the work that we do today will benefit 7 generations into the future. Thank you. And thank you, Mayor, for bringing this proclamation. And once again, Laura John, I am so appreciative of you. Bree, thank you for your leadership as well. And I look forward to the work ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Thanks, colleagues. Before I read this proclamation, I just want to thank our guests for being here once more. I also want to acknowledge the Native American City Employee Affinity Group Indigenous PDX for their work in drafting this proclamation that I'm reading today. So with that, I'll read the proclamation. Whereas the City of Portland now rests on lands at the confluence of the Willamette and Columbia Rivers, a major crossroads for the economic, social, and political interactions of the tribal nations for thousands of years. And whereas Native American people who've been here since time immemorial continue to contribute immeasurably to our city's heritage, distinguishing themselves as scholars, veterans, teachers, athletes, artists, entrepreneurs, and leaders. And whereas the City of Portland acknowledges our country, state, and city history of colonization, oppression, genocide, forced assimilation, mistreatment, and murder through government boarding schools and cultural erasure, but instead celebrates ongoing Native American resilience and survival. And whereas the American Indian and Alaska Native people of the Portland Metro statistical area is over 50,000 people descended from more than 380 tribes or bands from across the nation, representing a diverse and intersectional community that deserves to be celebrated year-round. And whereas the City of Portland supports, in concert with its tribal partners, efforts to preserve for tribal members and their descendants rights secured under Indian treaties, executive orders, and is committed to moving beyond recognition towards reconciliation. And whereas the City of Portland strives to educate our employees, community, and youth towards a better understanding of the American Indian and Alaska Native peoples' authentic stories, past and present, to preserve cultural values and otherwise to promote the future welfare of Native American people. And whereas stereotypes of oppressed groups used as sports mascots has been recognized locally and nationally as harmful, while representation of Native Americans in positions of leadership at the highest levels of government provides positive role models and a source of pride for our youth and community. And whereas our local Native American community continues to contribute to the cultural fabric of the City of Portland and has found creative ways to provide mutual support, to maintain connection, and to build community amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas the City of Portland has formed the Indigenous PDX Affinity Group for employees who identify as American Indian and Alaska Native by allowing for an annual budget, paid time, support resources, and relationship to a network of other city diverse and empowered employee affinity groups. And whereas the Tribal Relations Program hosted the October 7th Tribal Relations Employee Training for Government Employees, attended by over 500 people from 15 local jurisdictions, and will host the 3rd Annual Tribal Summit on November 18th and 19th as a place for regional tribes to engage with each other and with the City of Portland. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim November 2021 to be Native American Heritage Month in Portland and encourage all residents to observe this month. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. One moment, I'm back to the microtype here. Next up is time certain, the clock's hiding behind a plant, time certain for item number 815, please.
Appoint Gloria Cruz to the Charter Commission.
Hi. Sorry. I'm sorry, I thought somebody was saying. Colleagues, this resolution fills a vacancy on the Charter Commission created by the resignation of Commissioner Angela Jones. Council offices followed the same approach to fill this vacancy as we've done with the initial appointments, using the original applicant pool and the previously agreed upon shared selection criteria. I am pleased to share that Gloria Cruz was selected to fill the vacancy. Gloria's background is in human resources, working in organizations of different sizes in varying industries. Gloria is passionate about community and embraces the idea that excellence lies in paying attention to and carrying out the details. That is good advice. They strive to create an environment of inclusivity and belonging by building trust and treating people with compassion and respect. In their spare time, Gloria serves on the board of a small nonprofit that aims to broaden access to bicycling and its benefits. Gloria is here with us today, and we've invited them to share a few words about themselves and why they would like to serve on the Charter Commission. Gloria, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members. My name is Gloria Cruz. I use they, them pronouns. I currently serve as a senior advisor to Human Resources for Education Northwest. Prior to that, I served in Human Resources for David Douglas School District in East Portland and have had involvement in EPAP. I also, as mayor, noted that I am a board member for the Community Cycling Center in Northeast Portland, and I'm honored to be selected to join the charter, and I'm really excited to dive in and look forward to working with other members to do this important work. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Gloria. And before I ask if there's any public testimony on this resolution, did anybody have any questions for Gloria? Seeing none. Keelan, do we have any public testimony?
No one signed up.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Max.
I'd like to thank Gloria for volunteering to serve on the Charter Review Commission. I believe that the work that that commission is doing is some of the most important and transformational work that is happening in the city of Portland today. I believe that that group has the potential to fundamentally modernize our city and make it work better for all Portlanders. I'm glad to have Gloria on board, and I am glad to vote yes.
Rubio.
Thank you again, Mayor Wheeler, for bringing this forward. And Gloria, thank you so much for your willingness and for your interest in serving in this role. As we all know, the city is at a pivotal moment as we examine, how we learn from community voices to determine what the right course is for our city and our form of government. And I'm very excited to hear about your depth of experience and your passion that you bring from the community and making more accessible voices heard. So thank you again for your service. I vote aye.
Ryan.
Yes, Mayor, thank you for bringing this forward to appoint Gloria Cruz to our Charter Commission. Gloria, it's so nice to learn a little bit more about you, and also was affirming. I couldn't figure out why I knew your name, and then when I heard David Douglas and Education Northwest, it made more sense. And I'm really thrilled about your skill sets that you're bringing to this body. I can't think of a better skill set actually in this work to have somebody with expertise in the HR field, and that will really benefit all Portlanders. Anyway, I look forward to seeing your work and how you influence the wisdom of the commission. I'm excited to vote aye.
Hardesty.
Mayor, thank you so much for moving Gloria Cruz forward as an appointee to the Charter Review Commission. But thank you especially for continuing the vision we had about ensuring that we would have the most diverse Charter Review Commission to ensure that we got the most voices to weigh in on all the challenges that are facing the city of Portland. I believe in the individuals who we've appointed to the Charter Review Commission. And Gloria, I am thrilled that we're adding your voice to that mix. I will say, I can't wait to see what they come up with. I say over and over, it's not our job to tell them what to do. That's why we appoint an independent commission. I believe in that. And I know we've got strong voices, good representation, and Gloria will just add to the wealth of knowledge that that committee has. And I trust their wisdom, and I can't wait to see what they send to the voters for their deliberation. I'm very happy to vote aye.
Wheeler.
Thank you, Gloria. This is going to be a terrific opportunity for you and for the other members of the commission. I agree that the work here is fundamentally important to the future of the city of Portland, and I'll be excited to see what the Charter Review Commission concludes. I vote aye, and the resolution is adopted. The appointment is approved. Thank you, Gloria, for being here today and sharing your comments with us. Colleagues, with that, we'll move to the regular agenda. Item 818 is the first up. Keelan.
Authorize letter of agreement between the Bureau of Emergency Communications and the Portland Police Association to recognize employees who worked overtime in response to the Office of the Governor's Executive Order Declaration of Emergency due to coronavirus.
Colleagues, this is a second reading. Any further discussion? Commissioner Maps.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, colleagues, I'd like to take a moment to remind you of this ordinance's origin story. This ordinance comes from the Bureau of Emergency Communications. The purpose of this ordinance is to recognize the amazing work done by the call takers and dispatchers at our 911 call center over the past year. COVID has been tough on Portland, which means COVID has also been tough on Portland's 911 call takers and dispatchers. Over the past year, our 911 calls have increased by over 20%. In a development which may be related, during this past year, BOEC has lost over a dozen employees. And during this past year, many BOEC staff have taken administrative leave to recover physically and mentally from this work. This perfect storm of unfortunate events has placed enormous strains on our 911 call takers and dispatchers who remain in the employment with our city. I want to reassure Portlanders that BOEC is making big changes, which will soon bring the Bureau's bandwidth back into balance with its workload. For example, the Bureau is ramping up recruitment efforts and is on track to have a significantly larger staff next year. Director Kazi and his team are implementing new dispatch technologies and supporting the transfer of non-emergency calls to the city's 311 service. In other words, colleagues, better days lie ahead, but I also want to be transparent. Today, BOEC is understaffed, and that is the root of both the unacceptably long wait times Portlanders face when they call 311, and it is the root cause of the burnout which has currently taken root in the Bureau of Emergency Communications. And that is the reason why management at BOEC and I recommend that this council re-implement overtime recognition pay for this current fiscal year. The purpose of this program is to recognize and reward the remarkable efforts of our city's first responders who have kept Portlanders safe during the most challenging moment in our city's 170-year-long history. I also hope that this initiative will help BOEC retain staff as we rebuild and reinvent the Bureau over the coming year. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Commissioner Hardesty, you're muted.
My cursor was stuck. My apologies for the delay. I just want to speak to the matter 818. I have an enormous amount of respect for 911 call takers. Having them in my portfolio for 2 years, I know the dedication and the hard work that they always do. And COVID being no exception. You know, I used to be a little annoyed when Commissioner Fish and Commissioner Fritz would start their conversations by saying, as a senior member of council, and I would be a little annoyed because I would think, well, what are they implying? That somehow because I'm new, I don't know what I'm talking about? Here's a moment where being a senior member of council really matters. All of us agree that 911 operators have been overwhelmed for many reasons since COVID. I also have a bureau, Portland Fire and Rescue, that has been on the front line of every single disaster that has happened in the city of Portland since COVID touched down in March of 2020. Last year, I was unable to allow Portland Fire and Rescue personnel who for 20 months could not take vacation to carry their vacation over because of the unintended consequences of other collective bargaining units who would have wanted to do the same thing for the same reason. They weren't able to take off. What do I say to my maintenance workers who were forced onto a second shift because COVID required us to physically distance people? There are so many employees at the city of Portland who have stepped up in ways that have been phenomenal since COVID began. And I am concerned that we are setting a precedent that will make every other labor contract impossible moving forward. What we're being asked to do is to reinstitute something that was not negotiated in the last contract that 911 operators signed because it was a brand new contract. We're being asked today to vote for something that was not in the contract. And then next year, when we start those contract talks again, this will already be something that we'll have to implement. That I'm not worried about. I'm worried about the unintended consequences for all the people that work for the city of Portland who've pulled extraordinary hours with no recognition. What are we going to say to them? Because they're coming. And this is, again, if we had taken some of the one-time money and created a pool of one-time bonus payment, that I could get behind. But to single out one small segment of our workforce and say, because they're overwhelmed, can you imagine fighting wildfires, showing up at accidents, doing vaccinations from day one when COVID hit? My firefighters didn't say, oh, well, we're not taking calls. And so I am frustrated because I understand the value of having some experience in these conversations and what we're building towards. And I just want to say to the rest of my colleagues, if you vote yes, this will make everything else we do more difficult. Because again, what do I tell my firefighters? What do I tell my maintenance crew? They deserve a bonus too. And so I'm going to stop. And clearly I cannot vote for this because the unintended consequences we will be facing every single contract that comes up from here into the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. And Commissioner Mapps, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I did have a follow-up question. And if you can't answer it, I understand that. I am still trying to figure out the genesis of this ordinance. Because Commissioner Hardesty, I think, is making an important point. We all agree that the folks at BOIC have been put under a tremendous amount of pressure, tremendous amount of stress with limited resources during the highest call volume, certainly that the city has seen in modern history. But that same stress applies to our firefighters, our police bureau, our Bureau of Emergency Management that's been in near perpetual emergency status and stand-up for the last 2 years. I'm trying to figure out why this is coming to the council as something of a one-off for one bureau. Was there a consideration of making this more broadly applicable to first responders citywide?
This actually comes from management and leadership over at BOIC. As my colleagues know, we are very much in the process of rebuilding and reinventing the Bureau, and we're on a fast track to do that. So a year from now, we'll have more staff and we'll take advantage of technology much better. In the meantime, we have folks who are working overtime and are deeply burnt out. Frankly, we have an attrition problem over at BOIC. Once we balance the bandwidth we have over at BOIC with our workload, which is something which I think we can accomplish in the next year. This sort of immediate crisis that we're facing right now should alleviate. But in the meantime, I both want to recognize the staff that we have over there. And frankly, I want to stem the attrition that we see over in Bowick. A year from now, I think we'll have more people on board, but if we continue to lose people over the next several months, the wait times that we have on our life and death 911 calls are likely to continue to go up. So this comes from management, and it's about stabilizing the Bureau for a short period of time until we are to BOIC 2.0.
And I do appreciate that. I guess a follow-up question I would have is labor relations involved in this discussion? Have they given you any advice? And if
yes. Director Kazi and I have worked closely with labor relations. Frankly, they helped put this piece together. I don't know if we have Jamal on the call today. It looks like we might not. But
I'm
yes.
present.
Oh, there you go. Hey, Jamal.
I'm
Do you want to jump in here and provide some context?
Yes.
Tell us about your involvement in this discussion.
And Jamal, if I could just frame my question, and thank you, Commissioner Mapps, and Jamal, I'm glad you're on the call. Thanks for that. Commissioner Hardesty made a point which I agree with, which is anything we do incrementally in one of our public safety bureaus obviously bleeds over into the labor negotiations for our other public safety bureaus. And this ask on behalf of BOIC is, it's a tiny ask. I think, what's the fiscal impact here? It's like
20,000. It's small.
So this is, we've already spent more city money talking about it than the amount of the ask. The concern, of course, that I have is that if this is also going to apply to the firefighters and to the police bureau, then the numbers start getting a lot of zeros added to them. And so my question is, from a labor relations perspective and a labor negotiations perspective, is this something you're advising us to support?
Thank you, Mayor. Council, it's always a pleasure to see you guys. When I respond to your question, Mayor, is that in short, yes, this is something that has the support of the Labor Relations Office. I've had discussions this morning. I've checked in with the PPA, their representatives, and they have confirmed that there is no desire to seek anything similar for the sworn officers. They said that they view this as a previously used mechanism for the dispatchers that the Bureau has had access to them before, that they would like to apply again. So again, I interface with the PPA. I'm not assigned on the fire side of things, but I would point out, if we're afraid of this creating precedent, that this is language that existed in the 2016 to 19 contract. And when it existed in those contracts, the ask did not come from the fire or the safety bureaus. Again, it was the same language that existed. It's verbatim. And when the opportunity arose during those open negotiations, neither of those unions asked then. So if we look at a precedent, a history of this language, so that's what I would say to that. And again, without having extensive knowledge on the Fire Bureau, I don't want to speak too much in that area. But again, when we discussed, also there was a comment about that when the new contract comes up, this will already be implemented. The letter of agreement calls for this to expire on at the end of this fiscal year. The new contract begins in 2023. So this would not bleed into the next contract. But again, I hope I've responded to your question.
Yeah, that's extremely helpful. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Mayor, I just want to add, this is a brand new contract with 911 operators. They changed who represented them. They started from scratch. My fear is just because we have a historic memory of what our old contract conditions were, that we're pulling it out of a contract that does not exist today. And again, Jamal is doing his job. He's representing who he's supposed to represent well. Commissioner Mapps is doing his job. But his history tells me that this is going to have unintended consequences. That, again, if we had a pool where so many city employees who are facing exact same conditions that 911 call takers are facing, what do I tell fire and rescue? I'm sorry, you didn't have it in a previous contract, so I can't give you a bonus. Anything we do for one, and it should be, how do we treat one group of city employees uniquely from all the city employees who have put everything on the line since COVID? That's the thing that's making me crazy. Because this may solve Commissioner Mapp's problem with one of his bureaus, but it creates problems in all the rest of our bureaus. Because my people have overperformed over and over and over again. And the cost of me giving them a bonus is cost prohibitive. So
thank you, Commissioner Hardesty, for that. And I appreciate that. While I do realize that there wasn't a question there, I would also comment, I want to be mindful how I say this, our risk of loss is not even in the Bureau of Emergency Communications should we lose an employee there. There are no other precincts where dispatchers are housed. There are no other dispatchers that we can bring in from other cities or municipalities. So the loss of 12 dispatchers this year, that creates a significant hit as it takes up to 18 months to restaff those classifications. So
I disagree. I appreciate you saying that. I disagree. Okay. If we had 20 people leave, we have options of transferring call taking opportunities. So it's not as if we would be just shut down. That's absolutely not true. Okay. But if my firefighters quit because they're being treated differently, then you'd have a problem. Back to you, Mayor.
All right. Well, there you have it. Any other comments or questions before I call the roll? Keelan, please call the roll.
Mapps.
Aye.
Rubio.
I thank you for the discussion. I had a lot of questions about this, and I appreciate BHR staff and Commissioner Mapps and Commissioner Hardesty and everybody that I've talked to. Thanks for those of you that met with my team to answer questions. I want to first state that I recognize the importance of city employees that have worked really hard, either through the direction of their supervisors or on a voluntary manner during the peak of this pandemic. And so the truth is we're still facing these shortages. And that being said, I'll be supporting this request for a temporary bonus that is within the current fiscal year budget of the Bureau. But I want to really uplift what Commissioner Hardesty expressed during this conversation. I agree there needs to be a consistent way of moving forward to address these situations. And to me, I'm taking this as a one-time situation with the unique circumstance based on our extensive conversation the other day and extensive conversations with my bureaus. But moving forward, I really do believe we need more time at the front end before it comes to council to talk about these impacts. And also, I believe that these needs are better and more fairly addressed in contract negotiations moving forward. So I'll be looking to support an approach that is fair and equitable moving forward. I vote aye.
Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Mapps, for bringing this forward. Commissioner Hardesty for the important dialogue. I want to also acknowledge Jamal, Anne Marie, Lisa, and Shannon for the meeting that I had and my team had with you yesterday to talk more in depth about this very unique circumstance. I really appreciated hearing that management is bringing this forward. The language was in the 2016 to 2019 talks. At this moment, at this time in the crisis that we're in and the unique circumstances of the labor challenges at POEC, I am comfortable with this ordinance. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
I have a great deal of respect for the hardworking people at BOAC. I have a responsibility for all the employees at the city of Portland. And when I see us developing policy that is short-sighted and is not taking into account the long-term and short-term impact, I cannot in good consciousness support it. I also wish Commissioner Mapps had actually taken the time to have a conversation with all of us prior to it just popping up on the agenda, we could have, as a council, created an opportunity to really honor and value so many city employees that have actually put it all on the line ever since March of 2020. I can't blame my new colleagues who weren't here when COVID hit, because they will never know just how much city employees put on the line to make sure that our most vulnerable community members had their basic needs met. You will never know, no matter how many reports you read. But I do. I saw our city employees working their hearts out to actually make sure the most vulnerable people could live through the worst of COVID. I cannot in good conscience pick out a small group of city employees and say, hey, you deserve more because of the job that you do. I vote no.
Wheeler.
So a significant portion of the work that we're trying to do in the fall bump process that we're talking about later today obviously focuses on strengthening the 311 system, improving the 911 triage system, and bringing some relief to that area. And like Commissioner Hardesty, I was once the commissioner in charge of BOIC as well. And I understand that staffing continues to be a significant issue there. I understand that, as with our other first responder bureaus, morale continues to be an issue. I appreciate the strength of the recommendation from both the Bureau and the Commissioner in charge, as well as our labor negotiations team. Jamal, thank you for being here today to answer the questions. I'm going to split the hairs slightly differently here. I am going to support this because I believe that the core problems that exist in the Bureau of Emergency Communications are real, they are urgent, and they need a resolution quickly. That said, I don't think we can discount what Commissioner Hardesty just said. I agree with her. This will have implications for our other labor relations units. And Jamal, I respect you tremendously. I most always agree with you. In this particular case, I disagree with you. I would be shocked if this does not come up in negotiations with our other public safety bargaining units. But that is a risk I'm willing to take today, but I'm not going to be naive enough to assume that it doesn't exist. It exists. But I believe the short-term urgency within the Bureau of Emergency Communications justifies taking that risk. But I think we also have to go into this with our eyes wide open and acknowledge the risk is also real. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next up is item 819, first reading of a non-emergency ordinance.
Authorize the Bureau of Environmental Services to acquire certain temporary property rights necessary for construction of the Stark Trunk Relief Structure Project number E11009 through the exercise of the city's eminent domain authority.
Commissioner Mapps, I assume this has nothing to do with elephants.
Unfortunately, it does not. But it does have to do with protecting property and the streets in inner Southeast Portland. Mr. Mayor, colleagues, environmental services provides sewage and stormwater collection services to meet the city's current and future needs and to protect public health, water quality, and the environment. This project will alleviate flooding in inner Southeast Portland and protect the community by providing the infrastructure necessary to safely convey combined sewer releases through underground infrastructure. Now, this project will not increase the frequency or volume of combined sewer overflows. In a major storm, any amount of overflow reaching the river would have gone to the river anyway. However, because of this project, overflows will no longer flood streets and buildings in inner Southeast Portland. This ordinance will provide the authorization to acquire temporary property rights for the construction of a sewer relief structure and outlet conduit. Here today with a brief presentation is Amy Dunning, project manager with the Environmental Services. Amy, welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to share my presentation. And get started. So good morning, and thank you for your time. This presentation is for the request to acquire temporary property rights for the construction of the Stark Trunk Sewer Relief Structure. My name is Amy Dunning, and I am the project manager for BES. I am here today with Kevin Balick, PBOT's right-of-way agent. This project is located in Southeast Portland at the intersection of Southeast Stark Street and Southeast 3rd Avenue. This area experienced flooding during large storm events in 2015 when Eastside CSO tunnel levels were high. Our project objective is to alleviate the surface flooding. To accomplish this goal, we will construct a relief structure and outlet pipe, shown here in yellow. During large storm events, flows will be directed from the Stark Trunk, shown in red, to outfall 37.
Yeah, Amy, just so you know, we haven't been seeing your presentation until just now.
Oh, okay.
So let's see. Right now, we're looking at a picture of the intersection.
Okay. Yes, we have Southeast 3rd here, where the Stark Trunk is, and then this is Southeast Stark, where outfall 37 is. Sorry about the delay. So I'll just go back a little. So to accomplish the goal, we're building the relief structure and outlet pipe, shown in yellow. During large storm events, flows will be directed from the Stark Trunk, shown in red, to outfall 37, shown in purple, and out to the Willamette River, rather than discharging to the street. The new relief structure will be located over top of the existing Stark Trunk, which is a large diameter combined sewer in Southeast 3rd Avenue. While all the proposed permanent improvements will be located within the public right-of-way, a temporary construction easement, or TCE, will be required on the adjacent property for construction activities, including shoring and access. As shown in this aerial image, the adjacent property serves as a material storage area. We have conducted public outreach with the property owner throughout the design process, including meetings at the project site. In order to minimize the TCE area and the impacts to the business, we have come up with 2 different TCEs that will be activated sequentially with different phases of construction. These are shown in the red and green areas on this image. So here we have the plats for the proposed TCE. As I mentioned, these will be active during different phases of construction with minimal.
Amy, I think your slideshow might be a little bit behind. So where should we be now? Construction on private property slide?
Oh no, temporary construction easement. Curious.
There we go.
Okay.
I'm saying temporary construction easement. Okay. I have a black block over your header, but.
Interesting. Sorry about that. It looks clear on my end, so apologies.
Technology.
Yes. So here we have the plats for the proposed TCEs. As I mentioned, these will be active during different phases of construction with minimal overlap in time. This agenda item gives PBOT authority to compensate the affected property owner for the temporary construction easements associated with this project, and if necessary, to condemn for these property rights. The owner has been informed of the project and the need for these certain property rights. Market value will be determined by an independent appraiser. PBOT will then make a written offer of just compensation and negotiate with the property owner on the city's behalf. PBOT is also proactively providing relocation assistance to the owner. The project team has formulated a plan to relocate the owner's material during construction and temporarily reconfigure access and circulation through the site, to reduce impacts to the business. The easements will need to be secured in time to issue notice to proceed to the contractor in May of 2022. And that concludes my presentation. I will open it up to any questions.
Colleagues, any questions at this point? I'm not seeing any. Is there, does that complete your presentation?
It does, thank you.
Keelan, is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
All right, good presentation. This is the first reading of a non-emergency ordinance, moves to second reading. Next item, 820, please.
Approve findings to authorize an exemption to the competitive bidding requirements and approve use of the alternative contracting method of construction manager general contractor for the Carolina Trunk Work Zones 01 and 03 rehabilitation project.
Second reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It also has nothing to do with elephants, and we've already taken public testimony and heard presentation. Any further business on this item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
Aye.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Continue to be concerned when we exempt contracts from the lowest responsible bid, and we have no plan to actually increase the outcomes for minorities and women-owned firms. We have several projects in the Bureau of Environmental Services. We've given them that opportunity. And each time they come in front of this council, they don't have a solid plan on how they're going to achieve the outcomes that they say they want to achieve. It is clear to me that without a plan, we will continue to get the same outcomes that we've always gotten. This will pass. I will vote no because I don't have confidence that there is a plan to actually give us the outcomes that were presented to us in this presentation. I vote no.
Wheeler.
I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Next item, 821, which is a non-emergency ordinance.
Authorize bid solicitation and contracting with the lowest responsive and responsible bidder for the procurement of National Sanitation Foundation 60 certified sodium carbonate for drinking water treatment at an estimated cost of $8,500,000.
Commissioner Maps.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, colleagues, the ordinance before us today is sponsored by the Water Bureau, which supplies some of the best drinking water in the world to nearly 1 million Oregonians. This ordinance comes to council because the Water Bureau is in the process of completing its corrosion control improvement project, which adjusts the chemistry of Portland's water in order to comply with new clean water standards mandated by the federal government. Our new water treatment protocols will use 2 naturally occurring substances, sodium carbonate and carbon dioxide, to increase the pH and alkalinity of the water. This ordinance authorizes the Water Bureau to enter into a new contract to procure one of those substances, sodium carbonate. Sodium carbonate is commonly known as soda ash. You may be familiar with soda ash because sometimes it's used in cooking. So if you have ever made ramen noodles, mooncakes, or pretzels from scratch, you may have used soda ash in your home kitchen. Today, we have staff from the Water Bureau here to provide more details on this project. So let me now turn the floor over to Kimberly Gupta, the Bull Run Supply and Treatment Manager for the Water Bureau's Operation Group. Kimberly, welcome.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Maps. I want to just double check that you all can see my presentation. Okay, not numbers, but the presentation. Okay, great. Yes. Thank you. All right, terrific. Thank you. Good morning, Mayor, council members. My name is Kimberly Gupta, and I'm the engineering manager in charge of the Bull Run Supply and Treatment section for the Portland Water Bureau. As mentioned, I'm here today to discuss the Bureau's request for council authorization to procure sodium carbonate for improved corrosion control treatment. Sorry. Oh, these slides. There we go. All right. As you all know, we currently provide disinfection at our Headworks facility using chlorine, and then pH adjustment at our Lusted Hill facility using sodium hydroxide. The improved corrosion control treatment project is scheduled to be online by April 2022. This new infrastructure will allow us to further adjust the chemistry of Portland's water to reduce potential levels of lead at the tap by making our water less corrosive to sources of lead found in some home and building plumbing. Just a reminder of some of the key drivers behind the Icct project. It is required for us, in order for us to remain in compliance with the federal lead and copper rule. And the Water Bureau and the Oregon Health Authority, who is our regulator, agreed to a compliance timeline to have Icct online by April 2022. It also protects public health for everyone by reducing lead exposure at customers' taps. And the way we'll be accomplishing this is by using two naturally occurring substances to treat our water: sodium carbonate, also known as soda ash, as Commissioner Apps mentioned, and carbon dioxide. While these substances are naturally occurring and commonly used in the drinking water, food, and beverage industries, they are new to the Water Bureau. We're in the process of procuring a vendor for carbon dioxide, but need the authorization to do so for soda ash. And this is why I'm here today, to request that authorization for the Water Bureau to enter into a contract to procure soda ash for corrosion control treatment. And in case you wanted to know more about the science behind how this will all work, that's always the most exciting to me. This will be accomplished by raising the pH and alkalinity of the water. So soda ash will increase the alkalinity, or the buffering capacity of our water, to approximately 25 milligrams per liter. This will not only allow us to increase the pH, but more importantly, to stabilize it in the system. Carbon dioxide will then adjust the pH to the desired level, which we currently anticipate to be around 8.5. Since water with a higher pH is less corrosive, this will result in less lead and other materials leaching from building plumbing into drinking water. I'm excited to report that the Icct project is on schedule to be online this coming April. And as we speak, literally, we are wrapping up the new construction at Lusted Hill and preparing for startup and commissioning.
Excuse me.
Oh, yes.
Excuse me, Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, you bet.
Kimberly, could you go back one slide, please?
Sure. This one?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So for the non-scientists among us,
sure.
When I hear our water naturally is the best, greatest water on the planet, as a non-scientist, why do we add stuff to our water if it's already so darn good?
Well, we add things to our water because precisely for that reason. There's nothing in it, and that includes no buffering capacity, no alkalinity. So we need to add some minerals to be able to decrease the corrosivity of our water. Water with nothing in it is often quite corrosive. And so by adding some corrosion control treatment, the soda ash and CO2, that will provide us that little increase in pH and alkalinity to get that water all the way through to our customers' taps. And in terms of the chlorine, which is something that we've added for many years, that's for waterborne disease outbreaks. But that's why we need to add some additional items to our water.
Thank you. And one last question, Kimberly, because every once in a while we get lots of people coming saying that we're killing people with lead in our drinking water here. Do we have lead in our drinking water here?
We do not have lead in our drinking water. There are some homes and businesses that have lead containing components in their residential or building plumbing, but in our drinking water, we do not have lead.
Thank you so much. It's nothing like having a certified smart person to answer those questions in ways that the average non-scientist can understand. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. Anytime. I love science questions. Keep them coming. All right. So moving on, I'm excited to report that Icct is on schedule to be online this coming April. And as I mentioned, we're wrapping up the construction, preparing for startup and commissioning. And this contract is really the last critical step necessary to bring this facility online by our deadline. Since this project will require a large new contract, the Water Bureau evaluated the city's objective to increase dollars to Certification Office for Business Inclusion and Diversity firms, COVID firms. Ultimately, the recommendation is to proceed with a goods and services contract. Here are some of the factors that were considered and why we ultimately selected low bid for this contract. There are very limited vendors, 3 to 4 in this region, that are even potentially have the capacity to supply the quality. We need NSF 60 certified compounds anytime that they're going to come in contact with our drinking water. So they need to be of the highest quality if we're going to use it for drinking water treatment. And then also the amount of soda ash that will be needed. And none of these vendors are COVID certified. The vendors purchase soda ash from one of 3 manufacturers in Wyoming. This is where the soda ash is produced. None of these manufacturers are COVID certified. And then in further attempts to ensure that we're trying to build up our MWESB supply chain, we researched any COVID-like certifications in Wyoming. But unfortunately, Wyoming does not seem to appear to have state MWESB certifications. There is a state DBE, Disadvantaged Business Enterprise certification, and a woman-owned small business certification. However, suppliers of the soda ash are large international companies and would not qualify for either. The scope of this contract is for the purchase and delivery of soda ash to the Water Bureau facility. To remain NSF 60 certified for use in public drinking water systems, meet Department of Transportation requirements, and minimize risks, the vendors must use their own trucks that meet all safety and NSF requirements, or specific subcontractors that meet these requirements. There are very limited trucking subcontractors that can meet these requirements because of the volume of soda ash that will be required, and also the special type of trucks that will be necessary for delivery. There do not appear to be other parts of the goods and services scope that could be contracted out. Therefore, there do not appear to be any potential COVID advantages to doing a request for proposals versus the low bid option. The low bid option should give the highest competition between the vendors and provide the best value to the Water Bureau, which could be significant ongoing cost savings initially and over the life of the contract, helping to keep operating costs down. And so with that, the Water Bureau is seeking approval from Council to authorize the solicitation and award of a goods and services contract for sodium carbonate, soda ash. The projected financial impact is approximately $1.7 million annually for sodium carbonate. And this action requests approval for a 5-year contract with an estimated total cost of $8.5 million.
If I may, Mayor.
Oh.
Please go ahead, jump in.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was an excellent presentation. I want to go back to the fact that there are no COVID certified firms anywhere. If we're going to have a 5-year contract, what is the path to help minority or women-owned firms obtain some certification? How are we going to create opportunities for folks to get the certification? I'm sure it works very well for these very large multinational firms that there are no people of color or women who have access to these resources. If we're signing a 5-year contract, what's going to be different the next time we need soda ash? We're still going to go to the same white firms who don't have a need to actually diversify their staff or their subcontractors.
Well, we will continue. I think the Water Bureau continues to seek out opportunities to increase equity in our contracting. And so
put it in the contract, Kimberly. Why does the contract not say that we have an expectation that they're going to identify, mentor, blah, blah, blah? I mean, we can, we can ask nicely, we can aspire, but why is it not in the contract that we sent out, knowing what we already knew about who provided these services?
Well, there are very few people that provide this compound, and
I heard that. I did hear that, but what I didn't hear is what's going to happen 5 years from now.
And we can look into that and try to figure out. I would imagine that there will be better things in place for us to utilize to increase our equity in contracting with chemical contracts. So we would certainly continue, and with every future contract, we'll continue to look into how can we continue to increase.
But didn't we do that at the last contract and the contract before that and the contract before that? And right?
Well, we've never had a contract for soda ash. This is the first time. Yeah, so this is the first time. And so we're kind of learning all about the soda ash market. It's very, very limited. Yeah, and you heard, yes.
Okay, no, that helps me, Kimberly. I just assumed this was something that we've done in the past. So it helps me to know this is new. I guess what I'm still disappointed in, knowing what you know about who provides this service, if we were going to do it for the first time, I would have preferred that we were intentional in how we contracted. Because I personally would like to know there's a woman-owned firm or a minority-owned firm that's learning this business and going through the certification over the next 5 years so that when we do another contract, we have more options. But the city tends to, there aren't any, so here we go. So we have an opportunity at the beginning to set a standard if we're really going to change what the outcomes are. And so, again, I really appreciate it. It's good to know that we've never done this before, but I would hope when we're being innovative, that we're also innovative about who benefits from these public dollars.
Understood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does that complete the presentation?
It did. So I was just going to say thank you for your time, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Oh, thanks, Kimberly. Colleagues, any questions? Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this non-emergency ordinance?
No one signed up.
All right, very good. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Thanks, Kimberly.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up, 822.
Authorize a competitive solicitation and contract with the lowest responsible bidder for construction of the Errol Heights Park Development Project for an estimated cost of $7,060,000.
Second reading, any further discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Maps.
Aye.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Maps. Rubio.
I'd like to thank again the park staff for their work on this project, and especially recognize project manager Ross Swanson. This is an exciting moment for the Brentwood-Darlington neighborhood, who has been looking forward to this park since 2005. And as highlighted previously, these park improvements will coincide with the PBOT-led Errol Heights LID road, curbs, stormwater, and sidewalk project will provide safe access to the park. So I'm excited to see this project move forward. I vote aye.
Ryan.
Mr. Rubio, thank you for bringing this forward. This is an important and long overdue project in Southeast Portland to redevelop 16 acres into usable public park space. The improvements and enhanced natural areas with new trails, environmental observation areas, and amenities for play and sport will ensure that all Portlanders have a place to enjoy the environment that our beautiful city offers. I'm really excited to support this ordinance. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Rubio. Yes, finally getting this over to the finish line. I will say PBOT is looking forward to working with the Parks Bureau to make sure that East Portlanders who've long been neglected have the best park and street improvements possible. Very happy to vote aye.
Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Rubio. This is awesome. I am very supportive. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thank you. Next up is item 823, a second reading.
Amend sidewalks, curbs, and driveways code and transportation administrative rules to update and add clarification for the permitting and condition of driveways.
Second reading, any further business? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Maps.
Aye.
Rubio.
I want to thank Commissioner Hardesty and PBOT for staff for bringing this item forward. I really appreciate your work to update and streamline a critical element of PBOT code and align the code with policy changes, including residential infill. So happy to vote aye.
Ryan.
Yes, Commissioner Hardesty, thank you for bringing this forward. This is an important ordinance to amend our city's code for sidewalks, curbs, and driveways by codifying refinements consistently applied over the years and provide clear and objective requirements in that code. Last week, your staff made a really compelling argument for why we as a city council should definitely support this. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, PBAT staff, for the hard work to bring this to the finish line. I'm very happy to vote aye.
Wheeler.
So this had just about the most boring title of any ordinance I've ever seen in 5 years. So I want to applaud you, Commissioner Hardesty, and I want to applaud the staff for the PBOT staff for putting together what I thought was a really solid presentation and clarified a lot of questions I had and kept me very engaged. And so thank you for that. I vote aye. The ordinance is approved. Last item on this morning's agenda is a 4/5 item. That is item 824, please.
Authorize conveyance of city-owned real property located at 322 Southwest 11th Avenue and financing not to exceed $7,152,500 to community partners for affordable housing or an affiliate for an affordable housing project.
Commissioner Ryan.
Thank you. Colleagues, the Joyce is the 10th project funded by the voter-approved Portland Housing Bond that combines the Housing Bureau's capital funds with funding for supportive services from the Joint Office for Homeless Services to provide housing for our most vulnerable residents. This is a cause for celebration, as this means all projects from the 2019 voter-approved bond opportunity solicitation will be moving towards construction. This development will seismically upgrade and rehabilitate a 1912 unreinforced masonry building on the city's historic resource inventory. The Joyce will provide 66 units of much needed permanent supportive housing for high need individuals exiting homelessness in the heart of downtown, near transit and supportive services. While the ground floor at the Joyce Hotel could not fully accommodate, nor had the funding resources for both the necessary space for resident support services and commercial space, both Portland Housing Bureau and Prosper Portland have allocated the necessary funding to provide commercial retail space for the Fairfield Apartments ground floor, which is located across the street from the Joyce. This project is planned to begin construction in 2023. I very much appreciated meeting and hearing from stakeholders and property owners of the West End Security District last month. Their concerns were deeply aligned with my values for economic development and housing, which is why I advocated for this partnership between the Housing Bureau and Prosper Portland to reconsider ground floor commercial space and the necessary funding to support this retail space at the Fairfield. I was glad, I was happy that they were able to listen and work together with community and business leaders to advocate for more retail and hospitality spaces in our downtown core. And on a personal note, this is the historic district for the GLBTQI community, hence the name of the main street going through, which is Harvey Milk. As a queer elder who was once young, I frequented the block and I was on the block frequently, let's just say in the 80s, and was always impressed with the pedestrian scale of the area at all hours of day and night. As it became gentrified over the last 20 years, I was pleased to notice the active pedestrian flow of the area persisted. As such, it was personal for me to advocate for retail space in one of the buildings, as well as provide assistance to the Roxy Cafe to be taken care of while we had this opportunity to build much needed affordable housing in the core of our city. So again, I want to thank the Housing Bureau and Prosper Portland for taking a breath with me and recasting this development to add retail to the Fairfield to sustain hope for a joyous flow of pedestrian traffic in this very special part of downtown. We thank the community partners for affordable housing for their valued partnership in our efforts to house chronically homeless neighbors with dignity, stability, and for developing this project when supportive housing is needed now more than ever. I will now hand it off to Director Callahan from the Housing Bureau to share a brief presentation. Director Callahan, I see that you're here. Please take it away.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Shannon Callahan of the Portland Housing Bureau. Keelan, would you mind putting up the PowerPoint presentation for us? And I will be joined momentarily by Rachel Duke, the Executive Director of Community Partners for Affordable Housing, to talk with you about the renovated and reborn Joyce Hotel. Next slide, please. As the Commissioner mentioned, the Joyce is the final Portland Housing Bond project moving into construction. This does mean that all bond projects will be open or under construction very soon. And next year, we expect that 6 of our Portland Housing Bond buildings will open and welcome new residents. I'm pleased to also let you know that although we have exceeded the goals promised to Portland voters through careful fiscal management of our resources, we will be able to bring new units into our Portland Housing Bond pipeline at the beginning of 2022, focused on further increasing our supply of permanent supportive housing for those living on our streets or in our shelters, and to work towards achieving geographic diversity with an additional development in the Southwest neighborhood area. Next slide, please. As the Commissioner indicated, this project is located on the corner of Southwest 11th and Harvey Milk in downtown Portland. The Joyce has long served as a single room occupancy hotel, or SRO, in its more than 100-year history. And with your support today, it will be completely renovated, restored, seismically upgraded, and preserved for the next 100 years to provide permanent housing for those who have experienced chronic homelessness, providing both housing and wraparound support services. Next slide, please. As the Commissioner indicated, the Joyce is actually a grouping of historically significant buildings on the city's historic resource inventory. The development plan by Community Partners for Affordable Housing will include a complete upgrade, as I mentioned, a seismic upgrade. It will open to new residents in early 2023. I would also like to note that this project is expected to meet and exceed the Housing Bureau's hard construction cost MWESB goals of 30%. And we appreciate the development team at Community Partners for Affordable Housing for working so diligently to ensure that they were meeting those critical goals. The next slide, please. The Joyce itself will provide 66 homes to those who have experienced chronic homelessness. The Joyce will focus on serving the Native American community and people who have been affected by HIV. Next slide, please. All units at the Joyce will serve those with little or no incomes, pairing federal rent support from Home Forward. Supportive services will be provided by NARA, Cascadia, and Cascade AIDS Project, with services support funding coming from the city and county's Joint Office of Homeless Services. Next slide, please. The support services are being carefully tailored to each resident with the service teams, ensuring culturally supportive case management, behavioral health, wellness support, and crisis intervention services. Next slide, please. A combination of resources are being blended to bring this project to fruition, including resources from both tax increment financing and Portland Housing Bond funds, which are leveraged with other funds from Umpqua, Redstone Capital Partners, and from Community Partners for Affordable Housing itself. Our city funding is being leveraged 3 times to make this project possible. Next slide, please. In addition to the financial support, we will also be transferring ownership of the Joyce Hotel to allow the development to proceed. Before I turn it over to Rachel Duke, I'd like to thank the team at Community Partners for Affordable Housing for their dedication to this project, and to those who will soon call the Joyce home. I'd also like to thank and acknowledge the team at the Housing Bureau who have overcome many hurdles related to this project, and notably Jill Chen, Fayez Sood, and Lindsay Brown. It's now my pleasure to introduce Rachel Duke of Community Partners for Affordable Housing to talk more about this project. And Keelan, I think you can take the slide deck now down at this point. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rachel Duke, Executive Director at Community Partners for Affordable Housing. I would like to start my comments this morning by thanking Commissioner Ryan and Mayor Wheeler and City Council for the investment you have made in this project and in permanent supportive housing overall. Permanent supportive housing, as you know, is a powerful tool that will end homelessness for those who've been outside for a long time, who are vulnerable, and through providing housing, rent subsidy, and deep services. As I mentioned, I'm the Executive Director at Community Partners for Affordable Housing. We are a community housing development organization that started close to 3 decades ago in Tigard. And at this time, we currently serve much of Washington County, as well as Southwest and now downtown Portland. I cannot express to you how pleased we are to have the opportunity to be part of the solution to ending homelessness in this region. One of the many highlights of this particular project is the partnerships that we have. We're working closely with Cascade Behavioral Health Care, with Cascade AIDS Project, with the Native American Rehabilitation Association to ensure our residents will be successful and really to change the narrative of the Joyce Hotel. We are excited that we get to make the Joyce into a different kind of place. We will also be providing resident services on site and we'll be doing resident services coordination to support the whole community to keep all of the partnerships strong. As I mentioned, we're honored to have the opportunity to bring the Joyce back to life in a way that will impact people's lives and very positively, creating great change for the community as well as person by person, which is also cannot be understated how important that is. We are also dedicated to maintaining this incredible asset over time, as we do with the rest of our portfolio. And I just wanted to take a second also to thank Shannon Callahan and the rest of the team at the Portland Housing Bureau. They have been true partners. Thank you, all of you, for again making this investment, and we're really, really excited to be doing this work.
And Commissioner, that concludes our presentation this morning. And with that, we would ask for your support of the ordinance to move the Joyce Hotel forward.
Very good. Keelan, is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Good. I just have well, I'll let Commissioner Hardesty ask her questions, then I have a quick one. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. First, let me just say that I needed this week. I needed a project like this that is going to actually help people at the very lowest income levels in our community. I want to really highlight that we're taking a historic building in a historic area that is a URM, a unreinforced masonry building. Learned a lot about that my first year at City Hall. And we're going to actually not only bring it up to seismic code, we're going to update it, and it's going to be a new home to some of the most vulnerable people on our street today. And I'm thrilled by that, but I'm even more thrilled that the cost of this project is not out of line with many of the projects that have come in front of us before. And so I wanted to ask Rachel, how is it that you can check so many of the boxes for us that we desperately need to do and still have a cost-effective project that will serve folks who have not been served for so long in our community? I'm fascinated that you're able to do this. And as someone who's on a board of a nonprofit that provides housing for extremely low-income community members, I know the toothpicks and paste and all it takes to paste together a project. So Rachel, how did this come about?
I would say a couple of things. One is I would like to say that definitely the staff at the Portland Housing Bureau keeps us honest. They've been great to work with, and they've been really helping, ensure that we're doing everything the best way we can. But also, I would want to introduce our Housing Development Director, Jillian Siraj Fountain, who is really the mastermind, not me.
Thank you. Help, because I hear developers whine all the time. It's just not cost effective for us to actually rebuild buildings that already exist, right? We got to tear them down and start over. So
yeah, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to answer that question. It really starts with the donation of the building itself. If SEPA had to acquire the Joyce Hotel on its own, this project would not come to fruition. There's no way for a small nonprofit to make that kind of investment upfront. These projects take years to get to completion. Affordable housing just moves at a different pace than for-profit development. My background is in banking and finance. I used to be on the other side of the table for these deals, and they just take a long time. So I will say, first and foremost, the acquisition of this property by PHB makes it possible. If somebody else had to acquire this building for market price, it wouldn't be possible. That would be cost prohibitive to do. The carrying costs would be too high. I do have to give kudos to our very efficient team. We brought some subcontractors on from our hard cost, our construction contract, to actually work with our architects early on in the process to kind of go back and forth about, the architect might have this idea, but the subcontractor can say, well, that's going to be more expensive. What if we did it this way? What if we tried this? And so that collaboration of our team of Bremick and Carlton Hart Architecture really helped us keep costs down. And I will be honest, the costs were much lower pre-COVID. Everyone is experiencing these just extremely volatile markets, and I am so grateful to council, to Commissioner Ryan, to Director Callahan for helping us balance the budget in these uncertain times and bring this to closing. And I'm also from Portland and used to hang out on what is now Harvey Milk, near the Joyce and at the Roxy. And so it's really a personal project for me, and I'm thrilled to be here. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm sure glad I asked that question, Julian. Otherwise, we would not have had your passion on the public record today. Thank you so much for what you do. Director Callahan, as always, you continue to impress, but every once in a while, you impress me even more. This project is something that we should be proud of, that we're going to be able to make happen in the city of Portland. And Commissioner Ryan, this is the kind that actually brings joy to my heart. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Director Callahan, I just had sort of a question about the building itself. It currently has retail located on the first floor, or no? Is it vacated?
The building is vacated. It has had retail in the very distant past. Before we and in the beginning of our purchase, it had a small convenience store.
Oh, that's right. No, I remember.
It's been a long time since I think the last time it had anything was the Fish Grotto. And for those of you who have lived in Portland 20 years or more may remember the Fish Grotto, but there has been no active retail for
the Fish Grotto was one of my favorite places when I was a kid, and I think it made my parents very unhappy. But there you have it. So congratulations. I think this is great. Any further discussion? Oh, wait, this is a non-emergency ordinance, isn't it? Yeah, it is a non-emergency ordinance. No, it is. It's an emergency ordinance. So we get a vote right here and now. Let's call the roll.
Maps.
I'd like to thank Commissioner Ryan for bringing this project forward. I am happy to see this important project move closer to completion, and for these reasons, I vote aye.
Rubio.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan, for bringing this item forward. It's clear that this is a very special project for you. And I want to thank Rachel and Jillian and community partners for affordable housing for continuing their work to ensure that we prioritize affordable housing development in our community. I love the fact that this partnership will ensure that all 66 residential units are affordable. And I'm heartened to see all the partners that have been listed that are coming together to wrap around these future residents. So I look forward to seeing the project unfold. I vote aye.
Ryan.
Yes. Thank you. First of all, Director Callahan and Jillian and Rachel, you made quite a dynamic team in your presentation. And colleagues, this project is one of the many steps we're taking as a city to provide deeply affordable housing and reduce chronic houselessness, particularly in downtown, in an area that has been hit so hard. The rehabilitation of the Joyce and the provision of wraparound services will continue and advance this historic building's legacy of providing safe and affordable housing to some of the city's most vulnerable residents. And one who has lived with HIV since the early 80s, I'm especially pleased that Cascade AIDS Project will be included as part of the dynamic service team on site. This project also comes as a result of significant collaboration, which was demonstrated today, including the Joint Office, the Oregon Housing and Community Services, Umpqua Bank, and Redstone Equity Partners. Thank you, community partners, for the affordable housing and to the Housing Bureau and your leadership, Director Callahan, to bring this project to fruition. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. Thank you, Director Callahan. Rachel, Jillian, you rock. The fact that this project is serving populations at 30% of the median family income is exactly where we need a lot of housing units. And I am grateful that we have preserved the historic building. I am grateful that it will withstand the earthquake when it comes. And I am grateful that we have such committed community partners that absolutely are committed to the most vulnerable people in our community. I'm honored to vote yes.
Wheeler.
So this has been a long time coming. I believe the Joyce Hotel was last vacated about 5 or 6 years ago. The city's been working feverishly to find the appropriate partners, address some of the issues that Commissioner Ryan mentioned around seismic issues, as well as other structural issues. The partnership that's been put together here is really a fantastic one, and it's going to provide a great opportunity for the city to show what Director Callahan once referred to as the next generation of SRO housing in our city, which will really help the most vulnerable. So I'm really happy to see it get to this point. Commissioner Ryan, thank you for your leadership on this project. Thank you, Director Callahan. You've been there since the very early days of this project. And I know a lot of other people have been engaged too, and I'm glad to see it come to this important waypoint. I vote aye. The ordinance is adopted, the project is approved, and we're all looking forward to seeing the result. Thank you all. So colleagues, that concludes our meeting for this morning. We are adjourned until 2 p.m. Thank you all.